3 years ago, Kat and I decided we were going to buy a house in Mexico right on the beach. And then we heard from other people like on the internet and some friends who said, no, you can't buy a house in Mexico. Like, that's not allowed. The short answer is yes, you can buy a house in Mexico. But Gordon is a real estate agent here in La Paz, and he is going to talk about how that's possible, maybe why people don't think it's possible, because, I mean, there are roots to the rumors that are legit. So, Gordon Wilson from Baja Life Realty.
So the rumor, unfortunately, came about where you do need a permit as a foreigner to buy property anywhere in Mexico. But if you're in a tourist zone or a restricted zone, which is a certain amount of distance from a border or from the beaches, you need what we call a Fideicomiso. And it's essentially a bank trust. So the bank buys the property because they're local, and they buy the property in your name. And a lot of my clients get a little sketched out and a little weirded out by it, but I've heard no horror stories. There's really no risk in that.
Well, and I guess, really, in the United States, who actually owns their house? The bank owns your house anyway, because everyone's got a mortgage. But, it's a little bit different, and it is something that people do get a little bit freaked out by, is the possibility that the government or the bank or something's just going to take your house.
Right. When I first got here, or even before I arrived, it had been explained to me as it's almost like an annual license to own your home. Like you're paying for a license to be a homeowner here as a foreigner. And it's pretty straightforward, actually. The one consideration for foreign buyers is it usually increases the closing costs a little bit more than what you might be used to back home. But it's insignificant in the big scheme of things, and the easy answer is you can own property in Mexico.
Okay, so what about those what about the costs of doing this? Because it's, the bank's not doing it for free.
I tell folks that roughly $5,000 is going to cover the bank trust setup, the attorney and the notary fees, appraisal, and then you got to count on about a 2.5% acquisition tax. But the nice thing is, at least with our brokerage, we work with a couple of extremely experienced attorneys who specialize in this for expats. And so there's no multiple visits to multiple entities. It's like, blammo, your closing is covered. And it includes a lot of the mandatory things with the appraisal and the Fideicomiso and the insurance and the bank permissions and all kinds of things. The notario fees, the attorney fees, everything gets kind of rolled up. And it's pretty straightforward. Okay, so really, I've heard the Fideicomiso could be really expensive, but it sounds like that's maybe the closing costs are a little more expensive. The Fideicomiso is built into that. Yeah, I think ballpark, you're looking at a couple of grand. Okay, couple of grand. Yeah. Annually, like ours is like $500. Is that
That's
right. Yeah, there's like an annual maintenance fee for your Fideicomiso.
Okay, so you just have to remember to pay that because they're not necessarily going to tell you.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
This applies to residential property, condos, everything, or just, when you own the land yourself?
All of the above. Even if you're just buying a piece of land, a condo, a big hacienda, whatever you're interested in purchasing down here, you're going to need a Fideicomiso if you're a foreign buyer.
But there is an alternate option.
So another option is the corporation, but that's going to be mostly appropriate if you're buying a huge parcel or a whole bunch of properties. And in that case, talk to your real estate agent. There's a lot of little fine details you'd want to be familiar with.
I don't know anyone who's gone through that option. Most people just go ahead and get the Fideicomiso.
And I haven't done one yet myself.
So we just had a bank fail in the United States. One of the things I read down here is that the Mexican government is kind of protecting the banks and making sure they don't go away. But another thing that happened was the bank that held the Fideicomiso for our house prior to us buying it, they didn't go away, but they stopped offering Fideicomisos, which really added a lot of time. Also, there was the pandemic, so it was a lot of time to kind of go through the process. Typically, you would just go from one foreign owner to another foreign owner, same bank.
That's right. So traditionally, you can transfer a Fideicomiso, which is a pretty seamless operation. And it means most closings can happen in 6 weeks, 8 weeks or less. But I am literally just going through that right now with the transaction that I have happening, where the bank that issued the Fideicomiso almost 20 years ago is no longer doing Fideicomisos. And so they've pared down their staff and they've gone back to kind of just a couple locations. I think there's one in Cabo and one in Mexico City. And so the closing is going to take 6 to 8 months. So it's, a checklist for me, and what I'm learning is every time I'm going into a transaction now, I'm finding out where the seller's FIDE is from so that we can factor that into the closing time period. Now, is it a deal breaker? No. I mean, my clients were interested in doing an early occupancy agreement anyway, so we're just kind of working through it. But yeah, there's certainly some new experiences, different from when I was a realtor in Canada. I'm running into some different and exciting new scenarios here.
Yeah, and for us, it actually worked out really well because we didn't want to move in until December anyway. And we put the offer down in February. So having that extra time that we didn't own the house was just perfectly fine. Actually, I think the rates had gone down and the way the dollar moves and things like that, there's a lot of complications with that. But it ended up working really in our favor to have it take a little bit longer. So in preparing for this video, I did do a little bit of research here. So we're going to get a little history lesson before we go on to some benefits or beneficiaries. So this all started in like 1917 when there was a revolution and they wrote a new constitution that essentially redistributed a lot of land in Mexico. Essentially, there were a lot of like the Ejido land. And really, the revolution was really about land. So a lot of things in the Constitution were about who could own land and making sure that it was for the beneficiary or for the benefit of Mexican people, that it wasn't big foreign interests or churches buying up all the land. That's where it came in to say that foreigners can't own land along that about 25
zones. That's how they call it. It's like 25 miles from a beach. And along, obviously,
right along the border. Yeah, exactly. It also did allow that to be amended. And in the 80s, 90s, they amended it. That's when they kind of put in place this Fideicomiso process. So this is a government thing. This isn't some, shady thing that's put on by the banks. Totally legit because they wanted to allow foreign ownership in certain areas. And really, it went back to some of that farmland too. And the key here is, if you look at the Constitution, it really is making it so that foreigners don't have more rights than Mexicans when it comes to owning property. Because I'm from the United States, and theoretically, if something were to happen with my property, I could call the embassy and be like, you need to protect my rights as an American citizen in Mexico. And Mexican citizens don't have that. So essentially, you don't have that right to foreign government representing you in a real estate transaction, just like all the rest of Mexicans have. So it's really a very fair thing.
I've been really pleased to see just how fair a lot of the layers of the government work here. Like, I came from Canada where, an attorney or a lawyer or a judge was sort of, but here they have the notarios, which are almost like super lawyers. Yep. And notarios have to be involved with the Fideicomiso process. They have to sign off on it. They have to look through, the history of the land ownership, and they have to look at a survey to make sure it is where it says it is. And they do. So it's pretty legit. It's a pretty fair and legit process.
Yeah, and I have a theory, totally not sure, no one's ever confirmed this theory, but some of the property around our house, the owners will only sell to Mexicans. Like one owner put it on the market, and we had friends from the United States offer full price, and they took it off the market. This is my theory, is that because there is the Fideicomiso process that involves a bank trust and a notario and all this stuff that really wants to make sure, the bank wants to make sure everything's legit. If they sell to a Mexican, that person might just pay cash and take the title. And if there's something a little bit funky in there, it might not get caught. But when they're dealing with a foreigner, it's going to be by the book.
Very, very much by the book. In fact, at our brokerage, that's kind of why we only work. That's one of the reasons why we tend to really only want to work with a couple of different closing attorneys, because they're super experienced at this. They have checklists. They are extremely by the book with all of that.
Let's talk about benefits. So one of the benefits, this is something that is going to get talked about in one of my videos sooner or later, is that your will from the United States or Canada does not apply in Mexico. However, when you have a Fideicomiso, the bank requires that you have a beneficiary on the paperwork so that will pass if you were to pass, that the property will pass. So we got lots of dogs here today. So this is the beauty of Mexico. Everyone's got lots of dogs. So
Lupita needs to be the star.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, beneficiaries and stuff like that,
Well,
other benefits.
I'll share a quick anecdote about it. I was back in Canada. This is years ago. My parents had retired down here 20 years ago. And Mom called me up really excited one day. And I settle down, lady. Why are you so excited? What's going on? And she said, well, we just left the notario. We just updated our wills. And I, okay. And she said, well, you and Ian won't have to keep up the Fideicomiso. There's going to be huge benefits. You're going to have our property with far fewer restrictions and payments and all that sort of thing. So they set it up so that when your beneficiary receives your Fideicomiso, there's not a whole lot more hoops to jump through. It can be very advantageous for the heirs. So my mom was excited about that because she didn't have a lot to leave my brother and I, but now we get our house.
Now you get a house in Mexico. Sweet. Very good. Well, I think these dogs need some attention. And I think that is really what you need to know about buying property. We are here in the Baja Peninsula. And so really all of the Baja Peninsula
is a travel zone.
Yeah. Or a tourist zone. Yeah. So most of the rest of Mexico doesn't have these same restrictions. So this Fideicomiso, pretty simple. If you want to buy in the rest of Mexico, go ahead and do it. Maybe some, if you're a church, some restrictions. If you're wanting to buy agricultural land, some restrictions. But pretty much if you want to buy a house in Mexico or a condo, totally legit to buy. The confusion is around like the Baja Peninsula. That's where some of that confusion came in.
Right.
But also totally legit. You'll just pay a little extra fee for a Fideicomiso.
We were chatting a couple of minutes ago about how complicated it can become. And I sort of riffed on how our brokerage prefers to only use a couple of different closing attorneys because of the various hoops to jump through. And you had your theory about sometimes Mexican sellers not wanting to have to jump through all of those hoops and wanting to kind of sell privately. An interesting element of real estate here is there's not just one core MLS with the rules. There's one primary MLS, and to get a membership, you have to be licensed, you have to be part of the local board, you have to be expected to do things by the book. But then we have a secondary MLS, which is really laid back and anyone can get a membership and anyone can advertise on there. And then a lot of property moves through Facebook also, Facebook Marketplace. And so it's a really good reason to have a trusted realtor and an attorney in place who kind of knows how to deal with the foreign ownership, because there are these sort of hoops to jump through and a few more landmines, let's say, than you might expect back home.
Great. Well, actually, the next videos that you need to watch are going to mention some of those. I know that Pablo, when I spoke with him in Puerto Vallarta, he talked about the MLS and like making sure you use the legit MLS.
The legit MLS.
Yes, exactly. Sounds like they're all different cities have different legit MLSs. And then also a video with your boss, Jim, who has talked about some of this, touched on this in a video about El Centenario. So I'll put those up on the screen in just a second. But if you do want to get in touch with Gordon, call me. Call Gordon, and his contact information will be down below. But now we're going to take Gordon off the screen and we're going to put some videos up here that you should watch next. Hasta luego.